How will the arts save America? Today I'm going to show you 3 examples of that. This guy, these folks, and these folks. But first I want to tell you a story about something that happened in my previous job. For 13 years I worked for the Huntington Theater Company in Boston. And one night I was hosting a reception in the Huntington's lower lobby before a production of the play A Raisin in the Sun. Now, the Huntington's lower lobby is an intimate space, so it's very difficult to have a private conversation. So this one night, there was an older African-American couple seated at a table, and across the lobby from them was an older white couple. And I didn't quite catch how it happened, what passed between them, but somehow they started talking. First from across the lobby, and then seated together at the table. And then, when it was time to go into the theater, they exchanged numbers. I don't know what they talked about. I don't know what sparked that connection between them. I don't know if they ever even called or saw each other again. But in that moment of connection, between 2 sets of people who might otherwise never have met, is something powerful. Something about being together in that shared space. Something about the anticipation that they were about to go into a room with 800 other people, sit in the dark, and listen to someone tell them a story. I've been thinking about that moment a lot lately, about that theater lobby. That lobby is a place we all could stand to spend a little more time in. For me, it represents potential for healing wounds and bridging gaps that divide us at this point in our history. The 2016 election ushered in a new paradigm for how we as Americans interact with our institutions, our elected officials, and each other. It's frightening for many of us, but for some, feels long overdue. Now at this point, I need to tell you a few things about myself. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I was a Hillary Clinton supporter. I'm Jewish. I have a child with special needs. So I have a very specific point of view. And you would think that I would subscribe to the idea, like many in my circle do, that all Trump supporters are alike. Well, they're not all alike. There is evil out there, and it cannot be tolerated. We have worked too long and too hard and seen too many of our parents and grandparents march and protest and fight to let this rise again. So I'm not talking about these Trump supporters. I'm talking about these Trump supporters. These are counties in Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Iowa, Pennsylvania, and Florida. These counties, and others like them in these states, went for Obama twice, 2008 and 2012. And they went for Trump in 2016. They gave Trump these states, and these states gave Trump the White House. Now, which scenario would you find more believable? That a majority of people in these counties and others like them became intolerant after voting twice for a black president, or that for them the story of America changed. They were engaged with a new narrative that matched economic hardships they were seeing every day. That factories and downtowns in these areas were being wiped out by automation, Walmart, Amazon, outsourcing, and all the while with the sneaking suspicion that their country was standing by and watching it happen. And 100 other reasons why the life you live, if you live in some of these places, may not be the life your parents lived anymore. And if that's the reason they voted for Trump, if that's the reason for this transformation, then maybe we have potential for change. How will the arts save America? By bringing us together in spaces like that theater lobby, so that people like me who don't live that life can sit down with people who do. What if there were people creating these spaces? Like my friend Andrew. Andrew Ward is a British scholar turned New Orleans resident and gospel music superfan. In 2012, Islamophobia was on the rise in the Deep South, so Andrew decided to record an album. He partnered with Nashville musician Tom Larson and translated beloved Southern folk and gospel songs into Urdu, the national language of Pakistan, and understood by over 250 million people across South Asia. The project was called Wahida, the Sufi second line, and they did this for one real reason: to bridge the gap between the US and Islamic worlds. They performed across the South with Black Baptist choirs, bluegrass string bands, Dixieland jazz bands, and Mardi Gras Indians to audiences that were profoundly mixed: black and white, Christian and Muslim, native-born and Americanized South Asian. It's impossible to measure the impact that spaces like these create, except to say that there can only be positive outcomes when audiences this varied share the same space, raising in them the earnest desire to look to that seat next to them and say, who is that person sitting there who looks different from me? They've been asking questions like this in Minneapolis for a number of years now, specifically the folks at Zamia Theater Project and Creative City Making. In 2004, St. Stephen's Human Services, an organization dedicated to ending homelessness in Minneapolis, created the Zamia Theater Project, putting on stage together a mix of homeless, formerly homeless, and housed performers, all telling their stories at various venues around the city, reminding people that homeless is about people and not just an abstract concept of an urban problem. Minneapolis also historically has some of the greatest racial disparities of any city. So in 2013, the city decided to try something. They partnered with Intermedia Arts to establish creative city making, where they placed artists within city departments, 1 in 2013, 5 in 2015, and they're on track to have 8 by the end of this year, looking at problems in a new way, things that can actually turn into policy decisions. Here are some of the departments involved in this, working on projects as diverse as tenant voices, putting landlords, tenants, and inspectors in one room and workshopping theater together, opening up new lines of communication to get to the bottom of what it's like to actually live in these buildings and what it's like to manage the buildings. Or the Blueprint for Equitable Engagement, where they created the Equity Pulpit, literally a physical pulpit with a camera they took around to different neighborhoods, blowing up the idea of public comment, allowing people to give their voice on city issues at any time. So how do we take these examples and get back to this? How do we take the lessons we can learn from the spaces these initiatives create and use them to enact real change? Here's one idea. Our elections process is designed primarily to give us the opportunity to get to know the people we are considering choosing as our leaders. What if we also carved out the time and space to get to know each other? A different kind of town hall, a neighbor forum, where we come together in a common space, high school gymnasium, town hall office, someone's back porch, someone's living room, and share our stories, giving each other a window into the lives we lead. And then we take these profoundly personal, local stories and share them digitally across the country, so that a liberal Jewish father from New Hampshire can learn about mothers and fathers in these states, or Alabama, Texas, Montana, Arizona, anywhere, and they can learn about me. How will the arts save America? By bringing us together. We come together in that lobby before we go into the theater, sit in the dark, and listen to someone tell us a story. Changed just a little, moved just a bit, because there, in that space, that tiny opening, that window, gives us just enough room for light, clarity, understanding, hope. Thank you.